welcome to another episode of Game Theory, the #1 MMA DFS prep show in all of the land. I am your host, M.O.N.K, aka the Monkmatician, and in this very episode, guys, we are breaking down all 11 fights we have on the slate for UFC 289, headlined by Amanda Nunes and Irene Aldana. This show is aimed to give you all of the most pertinent stats I could find for each matchup to help you construct the perfect GPP and cash lineups. So without further ado, hit the like, hit the subscribe on this channel, share it with a friend that plays in different contests as you, and let's get going right into UFC 289.
Show's about to start!
Fight! To kick things off, we have Maria Oliveira going up against Diana Belbita. 8,200 for Oliveira. If you look at the top here before we get into the fights, we have all their records, their amount of KO, TKO wins, sub wins, AWIs, ass whoop index, their pro record, UFC record, L5 is last 5, and exact, meaning this one is a 3-round strawweight fight, as you can see. So how many 3-round strawweight fights have these women been involved in, and what is their record? In this case, for Oliveira, it's 1-2, but for Belbita, it's 1-1, even though she has 4 fights in the UFC. We have the measurables: height, weight, reach, and stance. Let's get right into it, guys. 8,200 for Oliveira. Her overall pacing, points scored per minute, 2.62, and she gets 4.34 scored on her. Not a good look. At distance, she's outpacing her opponents by almost a full point per minute, but inside the distance, guys, look at that. 1 point scored per minute, allowing over 6 per minute. She's only scored 81 points in her one UFC win. 79.18% of her total DraftKings points have come at distance. Meanwhile, just 14% coming inside the distance. Average bonus points per win was just a decision win, so that's 30 points, not over 100. 50% takedown defense, 9 of 18. Spends 38% of her fight time fighting inside the distance. Controlled only 9.5% of that fight time. Has a terrible strength of schedule of 61.84. You want to be about 70. Right around 70 is very respectable, and we are well below that in this case. No round 1 finish, wins or loss. And here's a new one: salary percent optimal wins. What the hell does that mean? Well, here's what it means. The salary of 8,200, the percentage of times it makes optimal when the salary wins. So when $8,200 wins, it makes the optimal lineup 50% of the time. We're not talking about the fighter, again, just the salary. So I thought that this was a little bit of salary voodoo I could incorporate into the game theory videos. Then we have Belbita on the other side. Overall pacing, 3.4 points scored per minute, allowing 3.8, so getting outscored per minute. At distance, much like Oliveira, she's outscoring her opponents. Inside the distance, much like Oliveira, she's scoring less than 1 point a minute and allowing, north of 4.5. DraftKings points per win, scoring just 88 points in her one win. And much like Oliveira, there is no takedown, no ground control time, nothing for these women, just stand up, because 80% of Belbita's total DraftKings points have come at distance. Just 10, almost 11% have come inside the distance. She controls just 7.2% of all grappling time she's involved in. You thought 9.5 was bad? How about you lower it by more than 2 points and you get Diana Belbita. 8 of 11 takedowns stuffed for 73% takedown defense. A terrible strength of schedule, a full point below Maria Oliveira. And salary optimal when it wins, set percentage of optimal when the salary wins, 52%. So guys, long story short, I'm going to be looking to fade this strawweight fight. Neither woman scores well in a win, it seems like. Neither one of them has any grappling capabilities whatsoever. Neither one of them is probably going to knock the other one out. I would be relatively surprised about that. I am picturing a 3-round decision where the winner scores, 65, 75 points, and I will be glad to have faded both of these, because I don't think either one 10x's their salary, to be quite honest. I'd be surprised if either one of these women scored 100 points. So yeah, I will be looking to fade this one overall, and I will look to get some value elsewhere in the mid-tier salary range. Here we have a flyweight bout between David Dvorak and UFC debutant Steve Erceg. Dvorak coming in a huge favorite here, $9,400. And guys, what exactly are we getting for the 2-2 3-round flyweight fighter in the UFC at 9,400, the second highest salary overall. Well, we get barely over 2 points a minute, and he's getting outscored. At distance, getting outscored, just 1.3 points a minute. Inside the distance, a much better number, but he's allowing just half a point less than what he's scoring, which is 4.8, allowing 4.3. Get this, DraftKings points per win, 65.76 in 3-round flyweight fights, just 65 points per win. He did score 95 against Juan Camilo Ronderos, one of the worst fighters at the weight class, but that fight was at catchweight because Ronderos did not make weight, so that fight is not listed here, just 3-round flyweight fights. I should have mentioned whatever is highlighted here, whatever record is highlighted, in most cases it's exact. Those are the stats you are seeing on the screen. So in this case, it is the 4 fights that David Dvorak has in the UFC, 3-round flyweight fights. Juan Camilo Ronderos is not one of them. As I said, that's catchweight. So he put up 57.5 against Espinoza and 74 against Bruno Silva. Therefore, his average is 65. I digress. 55, almost 56% of his total points come at distance. Only decision wins, never over 100, as I just discussed. Almost an 80% takedown defense. Doesn't spend hardly any time fighting inside the distance, but when he does control 62.3% of that grappling time, a very respectable number. And he has a good strength of schedule as well. His last 5 strength of schedule is 71.72. If you recall, I did say anything over 70 is something that you would want, so we are there in this one. But the salary of 9,400, when it wins, only makes optimal line at 43% of the time. That is a pretty low number here. Guys, all these numbers I just read have one thing in common. None of them are worth $9,400 at all. So I'll be looking to probably fade David Dvorak, and I'll be focused more on Steve Erceg, who I'm sure everyone will talk about playing, but when it comes down to it, will probably be rostered under 20%. I have no stats for him. He is 6,800. He has 1 KO TKO victory in his pro career, I should say. 6 sub wins, 2 decision wins, just 1 loss. He is 9-1, 5-0 in his last 5. His strength of schedule is terrible, one of the worst on the entire card. As you would expect, most of the time UFC debutants have very poor strength of schedules. This one is no exception, 57.18. Wins $6,800, wins though, guys, 57.14% optimal. So a decent little stat there. I will be looking to go under the field on Dvorak, and I will be looking to go over the field on Steve Erceg. A, because I don't trust Dvorak. B, I don't know what Steve Erceg can do. Maybe he's going to come out here, Muhammad Naimov, this dude, and make the optimal lineup. C, his salary is so low that if he wins, he could score good enough to make the optimal lineup. So I will be looking to have more exposure to the dog here, even though he is the UFC debutant. Let's keep it moving.
Fuck little bodies!
Featherweight bout between Blake Bilder and Kyle Nelson. Bilder just one fight in the UFC, coming off of a big win. I believe he was an underdog to Shane Young. That's right. So he got a big win there. Scored only 85 points, though, in that win, but basically dominated the whole fight. He is obviously 1-0 in the UFC, and those are the stats you're seeing on the screen. Let's see, outpaced Shane Young everywhere. 5.5 points a minute inside the distance, gave up just 0.28. Again, scored only 85.5 points, so you would like to see some improvement there, especially since he's 9K this week, guys. He gets 1 win over Shane Young, and now he's $9,000. Granted, he is fighting Kyle Nelson, who does not have the best UFC record, but still, that seems a bit much for Blake Bilder. 77% of his total DraftKings points in that fight came at distance. 17%, only 17% came inside the distance. Again, 30 points and bonus points in a win. That's just a decision. 100% takedown defense. Controlled 97% of what little grappling time there was in that fight. Strength of schedule leaves a lot to be desired. Just a 65. And when 9K wins, guys, it only makes the optimal lineup 41% of the time. So I do like Blake Bilder. I'm interested to see what he can do. I will be rostering him. It's not like I'm going to fade him into oblivion, but I'm probably going to be much lower on him than most people, I assume, would be. But that said, I might change my mind because Kyle Nelson has been finished several times in the UFC. In fact, 2 out of his last 3 fights and 3 times total out of his 4 UFC losses. So let's look at Kyle Nelson's numbers here. 7,200. What do we get? Well, he gets outscored by over a point per minute. At distance, it's almost 2 points a minute. Inside the distance is kind of where he shines for the most part. 3 points a minute to basically 3 points a minute. He's basically just, going tit for tat with his opponent there. 96 points per win, and I believe that's his one UFC win at the weight class. Yes, he is 1-2-1 in 3-round featherweight fights. So that one win, he did score 96 points. It was a first-round finish win, which is interesting because he got 90 bonus points, basically, without a first-round finish, the most bonus points you can score, and he only scored 96 points, guys. So if he scores 96 at 7,200, that's going to be a fantastic score, and he'll probably make the optimal. But generally, you would want your first-round finishers to score more points than that. 67% takedown defense, a bit subpar. Spends 54, almost 55% of his total fight time fighting inside the distance. Controls a good amount of that time, 53%. It's no 97% like Blake Bilder. So that should be the most interesting part of this fight to me, is when it does go to the ground, who's able to get their control time to come through more prevalently. Last 5 strength. The schedule for Nelson is pretty good, 70.63. In his one win, he did get a first-round finish, as we talked about. Has never been finished in the first round in the UFC, at least at the weight class. And has, 7,200 when it wins. Optimal lineup, 68% of the times. I do like Blake Bilder to win this fight. I would not be, picking a ton of Kyle Nelson. Probably not putting money on Kyle Nelson. But that said, I will be under the field on Bilder, and I will be a bit over the field maybe on Kyle Nelson, just in case what we did see from Bilder was just him fighting Shane Young, and maybe that's why he looked so good. That said, I don't expect much from Kyle Nelson exactly. He only has, like I said, one UFC win. Either way, I'd like to see him test Blake Bilder a little bit, so I will have a bit more rostered than I usually would, or that I'm usually comfortable with. That 68% optimal in wins for 7,200 would boost me by about 5%.
I never met a fight I didn't like.
So give me Bilder for the win, but I will be rostering both of them. A bit less Bilder than I thought, and a bit more Nelson than I thought. Here we have a bantamweight scrap between Aoriqileng and Eamon Zahabi. Aoriqileng, $8,300. He is 2-2 in the UFC, but just 2-0 in 3-round bantamweight fights, and those are the stats we are seeing. Let's take a look at what we get for 8,300. He's basically going toe-to-toe with his opponents as far as pacing goes, just under 4 to just under 4. At distance, it's a little bit better than that, but inside the distance, he's getting outpaced basically 3 to 4 points a minute. He's scoring 3 points a minute, and they're scoring 4 points a minute on him, is what I mean by that. 94.94 points per win so far. Has a pretty high ceiling of 125, which means he scored very high in one of his fights and very low in the other. Let's see, Jay Perrin, he put up 64 points, and Cameron Elsey put up 125. So that's exactly exactly how you get 94 points average per win. Scores 55% of his total DraftKings points at distance, 33% inside the distance. And if you're wondering what the remainder is, it is non-significant strikes. Points scored via non-significant strikes. 60 bonus points per win, so a pretty good number there. One of his wins over 100, as you know, it's the one, the Cameron Else win I just told you about. Just a 57% takedown defense at the weight class. Controls only 20.5% of the total grappling time he's involved in. Less than 68 last 5 strength of schedule, 1 first-round win, and when 8,300 wins, it is a favorite salary with a above 50% optimal win rate, which is fantastic to see. 54%. You love to see that. On the other side, we've got Eamon Zahabi, the definition of low volume. Just 1.65 total points per minute, 1.44 points per minute at distance. Decent score inside the distance, 3.51, but he's allowing 6.25 points a minute back at him, almost double of his output. Scores 54.88 points per win, and now if you're thinking, but he scored 103, almost 104 against Draco Rodriguez, that was at catchweight. This is 3-round bantamweight fights. He is 2-2 in 3-round bantamweight fights, and those are the stats you see on the screen. So that Draco Rodriguez fight is not counted in here because it was a catchweight. But yes, he has scored well in one of his fights. It was against one of the worst fighters in the division, Draco Rodriguez, and he put up 103 points with a first-round KO. Aoriqileng, hopefully a bit tougher than that. So 54 points per win, because in his other 2 wins, Ricky Turcios, he scored 51, and Reginaldo Vieira, he scored 58. So that's what we're looking at here with Eamon Zahabi. Super low volume. 79% of his total DraftKings points come at distance, just 20% inside the distance. So there is next to no ground game or control time game or clinch game to speak of when it comes to Zahabi. What would you expect? with that kind of last name, though. No wins over 100, as we just went over at the weight class. 75% takedown defense. Spends less than 10% of his total fight time fighting inside the distance, but he does control an okay amount of that time, 45%. 69 strength of schedule, so a bit better than Aoriqileng, but not quite where we want it to be. And when 7,900 does win, 66.67% optimal, guys. So 2 salaries here over 50% optimal when they win. I would say this is generally a fight to target. I don't necessarily mind this one because I think there's a chance for a finish here. I'm choosing Aoriqileng. I think he has more DraftKings upside, obviously, over Zahabi. So I will be a bit lower on Zahabi, but the salaries are such that that might make up for it. So I'll probably be pretty even when it comes to exposure, but I do like this fight. I do love these salaries for DraftKings. And while I don't expect either guy to score a ton, I would not come anywhere close to Xing these guys out of your lineup. Anything could happen, but like I said, I will be favoring Aoriqileng, his upside over the upside of Ayman Zahabi. At women's flyweight, we've got Miranda Maverick taking on Jasmine Jasudavicius.
Oh, is that so?
Yeah, that is so.
And I absolutely love this fight for DraftKings. I'm looking to get a ton of leverage on this one, as no one plays women's fights as much as they should, especially women's flyweight fights. Well over 50% optimal rate. 9,300 for Miranda Maverick. She's 4-2 in the UFC, outscoring her opponents by well over a point per minute at distance as well, inside the distance as well. 109.27 points per win for Miranda Maverick over her 4 wins. Has a 116-point ceiling and a decent floor of 33.23 as well. Let's see, 32% of her total points come at distance. That's it. Almost 49% of her total points come inside the distance, and the remainder is non-significant strikes. Like I said, she's scoring well over 20% of her total points in non-significant strikes. Those add up a ton and is probably a big reason why she's at such a high number in her DraftKings points per win. So just something to keep in mind there. 55 points per win, bonus points on average, I should say. 75%, or 3 of her 4 wins at the weight class, she's put up triple digits. That is huge for someone at women's flyweight. Just a 44% takedown defense. That is a bit, well below par. I was going to say a bit below, but that is well below par. Spends 51% of her time fighting inside the distance and controls 52% of the total grappling time she's involved in. Her last 5 strength of schedule is very respectable at 75.31. Has 1 first round finish win in the UFC, no finish losses, or in the first round, I should say. And when 9,300 wins, it is very expensive, so more difficult to make the optimal lineup. But an okay percentage here, 41.07% optimal in a win. On the other side, $6,900, Jasmine Jasudavicius. She's outscoring her opponent overall, but at distance, rather, a 1.5 under what her opponent is putting on her. But inside the distance, she turns the tables, 3.67 points a minute, allowing just over 1 point a minute back at her. Scores 95.53 points per win over her 2 UFC wins. Has a decent ceiling of 105. Only 18.5% of her total DraftKings points in her UFC career have come at distance. 57.5% have come inside the distance. And again, that's a ton of non-significant strike points left on the table there. So both of these women, well over 20% of their total DraftKings points come from non-significant strikes. And both of them, I would wager to guess, score better, much better than the average women's flyweight fighter when they win. 30 bonus points per win. 1 of her 2 wins is over 100. 73% takedown defense, very good. Spends 52% of her total fight time inside the distance. Controls a whopping 89.2% of that fight time. Strength of schedule leaves a lot to be desired at 66.5. But check this out, guys. When 6,900 wins, 83% optimal. 5 of 6 times $6,900 wins, it is optimal. I will be playing both sides of this fight. probably close to 100%, to be quite honest. Women's flyweight, again, has a tremendous optimal rate. Miranda Maverick has a great optimal rate as well. She scores fantastically, has humongous DraftKings upside. Jasmine Jasudavicius has her own DraftKings upside as well. The salary is fantastic for DraftKings when it wins. So I'm playing Maverick because I think she's going to win and I think she's going to score well. I'm also playing Jasudavicius in case I'm wrong about Maverick and Jasudavicius does win, keeps, tries to get a little win streak going, and then the $6,900 salary would be 83% optimal. So I'm playing both sides for that specific reason. I think you should too, but the official pick is Miranda Maverick. At middleweight, we've got a scrap here between Nasruddin Imavov and Chris Curtis. Imavov is the betting favorite and the DraftKings favorite, $8,500. He is 4-2 in the UFC, 4-1 in 3-round middleweight fights. So that 5-round fight with Sean Strickland is not counted in these stats, just 3-round fights. 2.63 points a minute to 2.25. He is outscoring his opponents at distance just barely and inside the distance by about 0.5 points a minute as well. Here's what I want you to look at. It is highlighted red for a reason, and red is bad. I've never mentioned that yet in this video. Now I have 84 points per win, guys. 84 points a win, and that's over 4 UFC wins. He's not even 10xing his salary at this point.
I don't even want to be around anymore.
Very low ceiling of 96. It shouldn't even, 100 points is low, and we're not even at triple digits here. 51% of his total DraftKings points come inside the distance. 50 bonus points per win on average, but has yet to hit a triple digit score in the UFC at the weight class. 76% takedown defense, which is very good. 50% of his total fight time fighting inside the distance. He controls less than 45% of that fight time. Has one of the better strength of schedules on the entire card at 75.14. No round one win or loss finishes. And when the salary of $8,500 wins, it makes optimal just 47.83% of the time. So it is a favorite salary, but just barely. It's 82, 83, 84, 85, the fourth lowest favorite salary there is, and we're only making optimal 47, 48% per win. That is not ideal. Chris Curtis at $7,700. We know what he is. He is someone that's not likely to grapple, as you're about to find out, and is basically a counter striker. 2.73 points a minute. It's basically even with what his opponent is scoring on him. Same as at distance. Inside the distance, he's actually outscoring them by about half a point per minute. Scores only 97 points on average when he wins. Has an okay ceiling of 109, much better than Imavov's ceiling, that's for sure. 86.5% of his total DraftKings points come at distance, guys. 86. You could accidentally score more points than that grappling or clinching than Chris Curtis has. Just 9.7% of his total points have come inside the distance. That said, 65 bonus points per win. 2 of his 4 wins, he is 4-2 in the UFC. 2 of his 4 wins have been triple digits. He has a perfect takedown defense. 0 of 35 takedowns allowed. 0 takedowns allowed. Spends just 8% of his total fight time fighting in the distance. Just 8% of his almost 60 minutes fighting in the cage. Controls 28.21% of that time, so not a good number. Last 5 strength of schedule is very good, but still 1 point under Imavov's strength of schedule. Does have 1 round 1 finish win, and when 7,700 wins, a much better number. 17 points better than 8,500, 64.58% optimal rate in a win. Yeah, I'm going to be fading the Imavov side. What did I write down for my notes here? I wrote fade. I'm going to be fading this fight in general. The Imavov side is pretty easy to understand why he doesn't score well at all, ever, for the most part. In fact, so far into his 4 UFC wins. Chris Curtis, like I said, counter striker. If there's any grappling here, I think it's going to be by complete accident. Chris Curtis, if Imavov does go for takedowns, Chris Curtis should be able to stuff them. He stuffed 35 takedowns already in his career. So I'm really thinking this one's going to be a stand-up fight with Chris Curtis kind of hanging back, trying to pick and choose his shots. What did Chris Curtis score against Joaquin Buckley when he KO'd him? Just 94.58 in the second round. So, yeah, I'm going to need, at 7,700, that wouldn't be the worst score in the world, but I would like to get something better than that. This one's going to be a pretty low-scoring fight, so while I won't be Xing either of these guys out of my lineups, I'll have a bit of Imavov, very low amount, and I'll have much more of Chris Curtis, but that said, it might be like 5% to 25% Curtis, you know what I mean, total. So I will be looking to fade this fight as a whole, as I see a lot of ways that this fight will not end with a 100-point total for one of these fighters. Back-to-back middleweight fights. We've got Marc-Andre Barriault here going against Eric Anders. And guys, I think this is a must-play fight if I'm looking at my notes here. I love this fight for DraftKings. Barriault, $8,400. He is 4-5 in the UFC, just 3-5 in 3-round middleweight fights. He's getting outscored overall. He's getting barely outscoring his opponents, 2.62 points a minute to 2.56 at distance, and inside the distance he's getting crushed, 3.28 points to over 5 points allowed. When he does win over his 3 wins, averaging 110.67, which is fantastic, but I believe most of that is from one win. It is the Julian Marquez win. He did put up 101 against Jordan Wright. That was a catchweight fight actually, so that one's not even in these numbers. 80 points against Dalcha Lungiambula, so he's a bit up and down, bit roller coastery there. Is Marc-Andre. 54% of his total points have come at distance, almost 40% inside the distance, 48 bonus points per win, 2 out of his 3 wins over 100 points, so we do love to see that. Subpar takedown defense at 63%, spends 36.5% of his time fighting inside the distance, controls only 32.62% of that time, a bit of a red flag there. 71.21 last 5 strength of schedule, which is very acceptable. 1 round 1 finish loss in 3-round middleweight fights, but when 8,400 does win, makes the optimal lineup 55.32% of the time. That is a fantastic number for a favorite salary. So Barriault, combine that number, 55% salary optimal in a win, with Barriault's tremendous DraftKings upside, scoring well north of 100 points per win, 2 out of 3 times north of 100 points per win, I should say. And I do like me a bit of Barriault at 8,400. Let's check out Eric Anders. 3.45 points a minute. I mean, outscoring his opponents by over a point per minute, at distance by 0.35 points a minute. Inside the distance, 5 points to 2.5. So basically 2-1 is what he is scoring inside the distance. Unfortunately, only 93 points per win over his 5 wins in 3-round middleweight fights. Has a decent ceiling though. Very good ceiling, 116. Very good floor as well, 47.5 points. So while he's not always scoring well, he does tend to get up there. In fact, that probably has a bit to do with him scoring 118 against Kyle Daukaus, because he also scored 81 against Darren Stewart. So again, a bit up and down, just like his opponent. Very even is Eric Anders, with 49% of his total points coming at distance, 44% coming inside the distance, 53 bonus points per win, so he is getting it done inside the distance. 40%, so 2 rather, of his 5 UFC wins at the weight class has netted him over 100 points. 82% takedown defense, so 20 points better than Marc-Andre Barriault. Spends 31% of his fight time inside the distance, and surprisingly controls 78% of that fight time. That is a gigantic number. A very good strength of schedule as well, 73.15. 1 round 1 finish win, 1 round 1 finish loss in the UFC, and wins $7,800 wins, guys. It makes the optimal lineup 70% of the time. 70% of the time. Combine that with Eric Anders' tremendous DraftKings upside and grappling time inside the distance, or tremendous upside for his ceiling, I should say, and you've got yourself a recipe for an optimal lineup. So I'm playing close to 100% of this fight, in my opinion. Actually, probably somewhere between 85 and 90% of this fight. Probably about 30% Barriault and 70% of my exposure on Anders. I'm picking Anders to win this fight. I'm picking him to outperform Barriault, but in case he doesn't, I'm also playing Barriault to get that DraftKings upside. So I am looking for one of these guys to make the optimal lineup, and I will be rostering them as such. Dan Ige going against Nate Landwehr. Featherweight fight is going to be a tremendous one to witness. 9,100 for Dan Ige, a bit expensive. Let's see what we get here. Basically even as far as pacing goes. At distance, he is outscoring his opponents by about 0.25 points a minute. Inside the distance, getting outscored by about 0.6 points per minute, or 0.5 points a minute, something like that. I can't do math at this point. I've been reading too many numbers. Ige, DraftKings points per win, 97. That is far under what you would want from Dan Ige and really from what you would want at your $9,100 salary. Ige, however, has a decent ceiling of 120.5 points and not a bad floor either at 35. 51% of his total points come at distance, 63, almost 64 bonus points per win, and he is 8-3 in 3-round featherweight fights. So that is a very good number. I mean, we're well over, almost 500 points in just bonus points so far into his UFC career. 4 of his 8 wins has netted him over 100 points. Again, something we love to see. Subpar takedown defense at 57%, controls only 42.5% of the grappling time he is involved in. That said, he has the #1 strength of schedule out of anyone on the entire card, 80.46. Again, #1 last 5 strength of schedule on the card. When 9,100 does win, it makes the optimal just 31% of the time, so it is very expensive, constantly is outpricing itself and making it very difficult on itself to make the optimal lineup at just 31%. So something to think about, especially when you see that Dan Ige, again, 97 points per win at 9,100. So maybe a couple of pieces of information there to make you want to fade a little bit. That said, Nate Landwehr fights are always exciting and anything could happen. Landwehr's outscoring his opponents by half a point per minute, getting outscored at distance. Inside the distance, though, is where he is shining. Over 6 points a minute is what he scores, allowing just 3.18. Even less points per win, unfortunately, than Dan Ige, 95.33. Here's the one that made it red. 121 points allowed per loss. Nate Landwehr, 4-2 in the UFC, 4-2 in 3-round featherweight fights, and he is averaging 121 points given up per loss. So his opponents clean up when they beat Nate Landwehr. Let's see, 43.75 points, bonus points rather, per win. 2 of his 4 wins over 100%, 86% takedown defense, and unlike Ige, he controls majority of the grappling time he's involved in, 68.4% to be exact, has a very respectable strength of schedule at 72, and a 100% finish loss rate. So both of his fights, is this true? Both of Nate Landwehr's losses have come in the first round. At least one of them I'm looking at. He lost to Julian Erosa in the first round. Obviously lost to somebody else by KO TKO in the first round as well. But win 7,100 wins, has an optimal rate of 64.29%, a fantastic number. This is a must-play fight, and I think it's minimum 50-50. Whatever your exposure, you choose your exposure to be, mine will be towards the higher end for this fight. Whatever you choose your exposure to be, you should keep it about 50-50 in regards to Ige and Landwehr, in my opinion. 50-50, maybe even 40-60, 35-65 for Ige and Landwehr just based on the salary. So I'll probably have a bit more Landwehr than Ige just because he's so much cheaper than Ige. But I like this fight. It could go to decision and the winner scores, 90-some points. But if that's the case, you'd hope to have your money on Landwehr, or you'd hope the judges, would point to Landwehr so you could pay off that salary and get some good value on 7,100. If Ige wins, he's going to need a KO. I could see that happening here. Landwehr had been finished, as we just said, by KO twice in the UFC. So either way, I think the winner scores, has a chance to score well and to make the optimal lineup. The pride of Canada, Mike Malott, fighting third to last on this pay-per-view card against Adam Fugitt. My goodness, that aside, $8,800 for Mike Malott. What do we get here? He is 2-0 in the UFC. How much total fight time does Mike Malott have in the UFC? 7.93 minutes. So we have less than 8 minutes of fight time for Mike Malott's 2 UFC wins. And here are the 8 minutes of stats. Outscoring his opponent over 3 points per minute. At distance, same thing. Inside the distance, same thing. 107, almost 108 points per win. Very good. Let's see here. 62.5% of his total DraftKings points have come at distance. 90 bonus points per win, so 2 first-round finishes. Obviously, both wins over 100 points. Has a 0% takedown defense, but only 1 takedown was attempted against him, and it did land. Despite the 0% takedown defense, Mike Malott has controlled 85.5% of all grappling time that he's involved in. Has a 71.74 strength of schedule, which is fantastic. 2 round 1 finish wins. However, $8,800, not the best salary when it comes to optimal. as when it wins, it only makes optimal 38% of the time. That is a chance I'm willing to take here in this must-play fight between Malott and Fugitt. Fugitt, 1-1 in the UFC, outscoring his opponents. At distance, he's getting crushed. 2.5 points to 4.5 points per minute. But inside the distance, he is crushing. 8 points scored per minute, allowing just 1.61. When Fugitt did win, he scored 126 points. And that would have been against Yusaku Kinoshita back in February. Now, when he got beat by undefeated prospect Michael Morales when he was $6,700. Let's see, 56% of Fugitt's total points have come inside the distance. Did get that first round finish win. Let's see here, 100% takedown defense, controls 95.6% of the total grappling time that he's involved in. So 95% control here, 86% control from Malott. This one is going to be a battle of who can control the other. Basically a 70 strength of schedule. Let's see, Fugitt did finish his one win in the first round, I believe. Yep, over Kinoshita. And when $7,400 wins, guys, it makes the optimal lineup 56.25% of the time. I consider this a must-play fight for the most part, probably about 80% to 90% rostered. I think this one's going to be a banger. I think it has a huge possibility of ending in the first round. And if it does not end in the first round, the longer it goes, I think Fugitt has a chance of taking over. So I will be playing both sides. I will be picking Mike Malott to win. However, like I said, the longer this goes, I might start to want to have more shares of Fugitt as well. So I will have plenty of both sides, in almost every single lineup I'm making. So I think this one's super sloppy and definitely has the potential of hitting triple digits for the winner. In the co-main event of the evening, UFC 289, we've got Beneil Dariush going against Charles Oliveira. I am looking forward to this fight so much. Dariush, $8,600 this week, 14-4-1 in 3-round lightweight fights. Let's check out his numbers. Outscoring his opponents overall 3.5 to 2 points per minute. At distance by over half a point per minute. Inside the distance, almost 4 points a minute, allowing just 1.39 back at him. The biggest problem and the only negative number on this entire stat sheet for Dariush is the amount of points per win, sitting at just 91.26. In his last 5, he put up 66 against Gamrot, 91 against Ferguson, 95 against Fajeda, 118 against Hot Sauce Holtzman, 98 against Close. So several fights well under 100 points. Has a decent ceiling of 110. 56% of his total DraftKings points have come inside the distance, averaging 51.43 bonus points per win. 35.7% of his 14 UFC fights in 3-round lightweight division have scored triple digits. A very good 78% takedown defense, spends almost 50% of his total fight time fighting inside the distance, and Dariush controls 82% of that grappling time. That is a huge number. Let's see here, 76.75 last 5 strength of schedule is one of the best on the entire card. Does have some round 1 finish wins and a couple of round 1 finish losses as well. When 8,600 wins, the salary has a 50% chance of making the optimal lineup historically, so not terrible, not great either. Let's check out the former champ Charles Oliveira, scoring almost 4 points a minute, allowing just 2 back at him. At distance, he's outscoring his opponents by almost a point per minute. Inside the distance, just about what Dariush is, 4.5 points a minute, allowing over 2 points a minute. But again, subpar DraftKings points per win line, 99.23. That is very close to 100. I personally like to see those numbers in the triple digits, but 99, close enough for argument's sake here. 60% of Oliveira's total points come inside the distance, very close to what Dariush puts up in that category. The bonus points per win, 79.5 for Charles Oliveira. He is obviously a bonus machine. 44%, so 4 of his 9 UFC wins in 3-round lightweight division have netted him 100 points or better. He is 9-3 in 3-round lightweight fights specifically. He used to fight at featherweight, and he has tons of 5-round fights as well. None of those are counted in these stats. Has a subpar 57% takedown defense, but it's Charles frickin' Oliveira. He does not care if you take him down. In fact, he'd probably enjoy it, just because he'll tap you out, is what I mean. 52.55% of his total fight time coming inside the distance, and Charles controls 65% of that fight time. Has the second best strength of schedule on the entire card at 79.5. My God. That is quite the strength of schedule. Has several if not more than several round one finish wins. And let's see, 2 of his 3 wins, or losses rather, he has been finished in the first round. Win $7,600 wins, guys. It makes the optimal lineup 69% of the time. I love Oliveira here. I love Dariush actually to win. I think Dariush is the money line side. And at 8,600, I don't mind paying up for him a little bit here and there. But this number, the only red number on Dariush's side, really makes me nervous. 91 point. He simply does not score well at all. Oliveira, what are we going to get here? He could go the distance, but Oliveira also tends to get finished a bit. Let's see, 8 of his 9 pro losses, he has been finished. So that is a bit scary for that reason. I will have Dariush rostered, and at 8,600, he's not going to break my bank. And I am rostering Oliveira for the obvious reasons. He's cheaper. The 69% salary optimal win rate is a big one for me as well. 80 bonus points per win. Tons of first round finishes. And Dariush, you know, fluke or not, has been flatlined in the first round before. So I think there's upside to both guys. I think Oliveira has the much higher DraftKings upside, but it's not terrible. It's not a wide gap per se, like we have seen in a couple of these fights. So give me both guys. What do I have in my notes here? I just have Oliveira written down as a guy to play. So yeah, give me the slight fade on Dariush. I'll probably be under the field on him, as I do think the field will go a little bit crazy on him this week. And give me over on Oliveira. I think I'm going to go over whatever the field is at, rostering both guys in the process. And in the main event of the evening, we've got Amanda Nunes, the most expensive fighter on the slate, 9,500, going against the cheapest fighter on the slate, Irene Aldana, 6,700 for the women's bantamweight championship 5-round fight. This one is simple, guys. This is a must-play fight. I mean, I'm talking 100%. Whatever you're not playing in Nunes, play in Aldana. And here's the bottom line. Aldana's numbers are not very good. She's getting outscored literally from everywhere. Her DraftKings points per win numbers in her career are not good. 91 points per win, less than 91 points per win. 51 bonus points per win is good. 81% takedown defense is good. 28.5% of her total wins have netted her over 100 points. She controls just 16% of the grappling time she's involved in. Her strength of schedule is terrible at 67.5. When $6,700 wins, guys, and it's happened 2 times since 2021. That's right, 2 times, less than 5%. It has a 100% optimal rate. So Nunes should win here. She should smash. And if you'll look up at the screen, I don't even really have to go over the numbers for Nunes. I will briefly. She's outscoring her opponents in a ridiculous fashion. I mean, look at all the green. There is not one red number on Amanda Nunes' screen. Literally, I couldn't find one. I tried to make it happen, and I couldn't. I mean, she controls 91% of the grappling time, 87% takedown defense, 43% of her wins have come in the first round. Highest ceiling on the card, averaging 121.5 per win. She's 7-1 in 5-round women's bantamweight fights, averaging 4 points a minute. And when 9,500 does win, it ain't no 30 or 20% like we've seen in some of these higher salaries. It's almost 50, 47.5% optimal rate. Guys, if Nunes wins here, she should finish and finish early. And if she doesn't finish, she should absolutely rack up the points on Irene Aldana with takedowns, control time, and ground and pound. So I love Amanda Nunes at 9,500. I mean, I absolutely love her. One of the best DraftKings scores we've ever seen, quite frankly, and especially at the weight class. And if the unthinkable happens, and Aldana, not unthinkable, it's definitely thinkable. I think, you know, if Aldana, you know, say Nunes is about to retire and Aldana comes out here and Juliana Pena jabs her to death, you want Aldana roster no matter how bad her numbers might look on paper at 6,700. So, bottom line, if Nunes wins, she should score well enough to make the optimal lineup. If Nunes loses, Aldana will make the optimal lineup. So 100% exposure to this fight is what I will have. Probably something like 70-30. Nunes to Aldana, 75-25, 65, something like that. At least 2-1, 3-1 for Nunes to Aldana. So, yeah, that's kind of how I see this one. I picked Nunes to win. That's going to do it, guys. UFC 289. Before we get out of here, let's throw it over to M.O.N.K to go over CM M.O.N.K's picks for UFC 289. Thank you, Monk. Real quick before we get started, guys, thank you so much for sticking around to this part in the video. Hit that like, hit the sub on this channel, and remember to share with a friend who plays in different tournaments than you. Real quickly, let's go over CM Monk's picks. Last week, not a good week for CM Monk. He got 6 correct out of 13 picks for a 46% win rate. Year to date, 134 out of 215, still well over 60%, so we are still proud of that. 62.33% accurate, and here are the picks for UFC 287 according to CM Monk. We've got Diana Belbita by decision, David Dvorak by decision, Blake Bilder by finish, Eamon Zahabi decision, Miranda Maverick decision, Nasruddin Imavov decision, Eric Anders decision, Nate Landwehr decision, Mike Malott finish, Beneil Dariush finish, interesting, and Amanda Nunes by finish. So only 4 finishes this week projected from CM Monk, so not too much violence, but let's hope for some positive DraftKings results. One last thing before we get you out of here, let's throw it over to Monk to see who will be Monk's M.O.N.K pick of the week, the most owned no-nonsense pick of the week for UFC 289. Once again, thank you, Monk, and here we are with the most owned no-nonsense, the Monk pick of the week for UFC 289. Guys, it's obvious. It's Amanda Nunes, $9,500 here. Amanda Nunes should be able to take care of Irene Aldana. I love the $9,500 salary. It has a great optimal rate of 47% when it does win. Amanda is the best DraftKings scorer on the card. In fact, she, by what I mean by that, she has the greatest DraftKings upside. Historically, she has the greatest DraftKings stats that we have available on this card. She scores constantly well in 5-round women's bantamweight fights, averaging 121 points per win. Has the highest ceiling on the card as well. Knows a thing or two about how to get finish wins. So I absolutely love Amanda Nunes this week. And again, guys, I'm not hedging this part, but play 100% of that fight, because if Aldana somehow does get the win, she will make the optimal lineup. So I love this fight for optimal, but I specifically love Amanda Nunes. I'm picking her to win, and she is Monk's M.O.N.K, the most owned no-nonsense pick of the week for UFC 289. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining me. This has been Game Theory for UFC 289. I hope I gave you the most pertinent stats and information you need to construct some high-quality, wallet-fattening GPP and cash lineups this weekend for the pay-per-view. So in the comments, let me know who you think's going to win these fights. Who's going to win the main event? Who is your #1 pick of the week? Who's your most rostered pick of the week? Your favorite underdog, etc. I want to hear about all of it. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, guys. We're growing and growing day by day, slowly but surely. Again, share this with someone that plays in different contests as you. And as usual, I want all of you to enjoy the fights. So, enjoy. We will see you in the next one.